This is Reasons to be Cheerful with Ed Miliband and Jeff Lloyd.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
Oh, I was thinking of you at the stroke of midnight.
Oh, I was thinking of you.
Should old acquaintance be forgot?
Oh.
I don't think they should, broadly speaking.
No.
No.
I know we're going to be talking a bit about 2017 in this episode, but it's quite good to have left behind 2017, isn't it?
It's a reboot. It feels like a reboot. It's a new exercise book.
Exactly.
It's an
There's all those unbroken
page.
Resolutions,
yes.
Things that you can turn over a new leaf on. It's kind of always good.
In a way, it's the most cheerful time of the year because you've got it all ahead of you.
Exactly.
You're unjaded.
Yeah, the other thing I like about this time of year is a rather technical point, or not, it's not that technical, which is that the days are getting longer from here on in. Spring is on the way. You're through the shortest day of the year. You're through that sort of November, the grind of November.
I'm worried that the level of positivity here is almost sickening. We almost sound like Americans.
We do. Well, but it's not a bad thing to aspire to. Bit of optimism.
No, but there can be too much optimism.
Well, you think it's time to grumble a bit?
Yeah, a little bit. How are you in between days?
Oh, I've had a nice Christmas period. We went away. This is a reason to be cheerful. We caught a few days in Morocco. I had to come back early for work reasons, but we had got some sun in Essaouira. Nice. In Morocco. It was great. It was really nice to be with the family. It was really nice to get a bit of sun. When I arrived, the Moroccans were incredibly friendly, but you have to sort of fill in one of these forms about, what you do. And I thought, I don't really want to sort of draw attention to my job here. So I just put MP. And so then the man behind the counter said to me, what is an MP? What do you mean by MP? And I said, politician. And there was this guy who had police on, who was wandering around. And I said, actually, I'm a politician. He said, what party are you? And I said, Labour. He goes, I know who you are. And I said, yes, it is me. And then just at that moment, this man came up to the desk and he said, yeah, this is the guy who was nearly Prime Minister.
Wow.
But it sort of followed me around slightly, you know what I mean?
The man who was nearly Prime Minister. Almost.
And he was sort of saying it to the man behind the counter.
Well, I think it's better than him saying, this is the man who was delusional enough to think that he might be Prime Minister, and we all knew it would never happen. He didn't say that.
He didn't.
He said this was the man who was almost Prime Minister.
Yeah, but it's sort of, anyway, I got on with my holiday and it was nice. What about you? What's your reason to be cheerful?
So I've not done very much. I had a friend round on Christmas Day, my friend Susie, and we just hung out. But there's a cafe we go to close to our house, which is a Turkish cafe, so it's open over Christmas. So we spent a bit of time there taking my baby son there because there are toys for him to play with. And we know the people who work there quite well.
This is the people who supply the cookies.
That's right. Yeah. So
the cookies that power this podcast.
So I'm talking to them, and the girl who works there says, we're going to be closed now for a few days over the new year. I say, I'm sorry to hear that. She says, yeah, I'm going back to Turkey for a few days. So I say, well, you have a wonderful time. At which point she comes round from the back of the counter to give me a hug. And I think, okay, I've got to go in for the hug there. So I go in for the hug, and as soon as I do, it feels uncomfortable. And it's at that moment that I realise she hasn't come round for a hug. She's come round to give the baby a kiss on the forehead or something. She was actually aiming towards the baby. So I think, oh my God, now I look like I just wanted to get my hands on the girl who worked in the cafe. So I made a point because I didn't want to look like that. I made a point of going and finding the man who worked there as well and giving him a big hug, just so it didn't look like there was any kind of weird sexual undertone to it, which there wasn't.
That's kind of awkward, isn't it?
It's kind of.
It's like me. It is like me and an inanimate object.
And
you an inanimate object.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, does that count as a reason to be cheerful?
It's quite a funny story.
Well, there we go. I've given you a reason to be cheerful.
Yeah, you have given me a reason to be cheerful. But I think we should be cheerful about 2018.
Great. I'm going to make a concerted effort to be more positive. As long as it doesn't involve talking to strangers on public transport.
It definitely involves that.
So, shall we talk about what we are doing for this special New Year episode then?
Let's.
We are putting 2017 in its box, and a lot of people would say, let's close that box, let's gaffer tape it up, let's never look in there again. But what we want to do is try and prove conclusively that there were good things.
Extract the pearls from 2017.
Exactly, yes. And joining us to do that, we have two of our finest comedians, Sofie Hagen who is just wonderful. She won Best Newcomer at Edinburgh a few years ago. She does a wonderful podcast called Made of Human. She's on tour with a show called Dead Baby Frog. She's really wonderful. And she will be accompanied by her comedy best friend, Mark Watson, who I think we last saw earlier last year now on an island on Channel 4, marooned with a bunch of people on a Bear Grylls programme. So they are going to be joining us to pick out the things, the pearls.
And you've been on Sofie's podcast, is that right?
I've been invited on Sofie.
Oh, good.
I kind of
nice.
invited myself onto Sofie's podcast.
Oh, that's nice. How did it go?
Didn't go great. She cancelled me at the last minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to have raised it.
Yeah, but I think we shouldn't bring that up and make an awkward dynamic in the room.
And also,
I think any mention of it might make things slightly strange. And of course, there'll be no awkwardness with you and Mark Watson because when was the last time you saw him, Ed?
Well, that was when I didn't win the award.
But you were nominated.
I was nominated and I came second. Just like at the general election, as the Moroccan bloke said to me.
This is the man who nearly won a radio award.
Exactly. Well, I suppose the Moroccan bloke could have said that to me.
Yeah.
You're listening to Reasons to be Cheerful with Ed Miliband and Jeff Lloyd.
So we are determined to prove that 2017 wasn't just a terrible year. We want to put it to bed nicely and wish it sweet dreams, right?
We do.
So helping us do that, we are joined by comedy best friends Sofie, Hagen and Mark Watson. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very nice.
But you are comedy best, and I picked this up from Twitter and Instagram. You seem to be joined at the hip.
We never stop banging on about it. Yeah.
How did you become comedy best friends?
I started asking Mark for advice about literally every single decision I had to make in comedy.
I took over Sophie's life.
What gave you the impression that he was wise?
Oh, he was just online at the time, I think.
Yeah.
No,
Not so
but
much online, it's just connected to the internet. Yeah.
No, it's just I think I was a big fan. And then I got to know him, and now he's more like a human being. But also, I think I admire the way he does comedy, the way he kind of thinks outside the box and does these kind of gigs that no one else would be silly enough to do.
For people who don't know what you're talking about, I mean, Mark, would it embarrass you to get you to tell us what Sophie's talking about?
I think I'm already in an embarrassing situation, sitting next to this gushing fangirl.
That's what I find with Jeff every week.
Yeah. You must be used to this sort of dynamic, but it's quite difficult to negotiate.
It's hard. We'll talk about it
Podcasts
later,
are so intimate physically, aren't they?
But you do like 24-hour gigs and you do games and things as well as your stand-up.
Yeah, I'm a pioneer and an inspiration, Jeff. Yeah. Well, I've done lots of stupid, like weird conceptual shows. It's true, and but the strange thing is, I would have never thought that Sofie was conscious of all that, because you in turn only became aware of that stuff through an old podcast.
Yeah, podcast you did in 2010 or 12 or something.
Yes, with Marsha from XFM, wasn't it? So that's the thing.
It's called Marsha Meets. It's still up there. It's really good. She has some really, really good conversations with people.
But Sophie wasn't even here at that point, so our whole friendship has been it's only a year old, basically. We'd barely met before. Yeah. Four best friends. We're really still in the early
Sophie,
stages.
you came here from Denmark, yeah?
Yeah, about 5 years ago.
Right.
And Sofie did a whole show about sort of pursuing Westlife.
Yeah.
And do you feel like a lot of what you were putting into your Westlife obsession, you're now putting into a Mark Watson obsession?
Yeah, but he's dangerously available.
I'm much more attainable. There's only one of me, and you can track my location.
It's me queuing outside of his house. He's just like, hey, do you want to have breakfast? I'm like, oh, that's...
Plus, I don't have the commitments that Westlife do. They really were getting around a lot in that period.
I mean, at this point, I feel like I should sort of, in the interest of full disclosure, say that at the award ceremony where I failed to win the award,
there's always next year. Ed.
You're
not eligible next year for Best Newcomer, are you?
Runner up.
You get one shot at it.
Thank you, Jeff.
There never will be another year. No.
If I can carry on, Jeff's got lots of awards up there. You should all look at them and admire them. They're from some years back, just to say.
Once you've got it, you've always got it on your shelf.
But Mark did an incredibly funny routine at the beginning where the sort of conceit was you didn't really quite know why you'd been invited and what your purpose was at the...
Which was not really conceit, it was absolutely true. They hurriedly booked me at the last minute.
Who do you think dropped out?
Well, the weird thing is, I don't think anyone dropped out, because there already was a host, Trevor Nelson, who was doing a perfectly good job, but also a bloke from Audible did a bit of this. There were about 4 different speeches at the start already, but someone had obviously taken it into their head that a comedian was necessary. So I just did more or less 7 minutes of saying, there's no point in me being here at all. And that has tended to be quite a successful angle for me.
Before we get into reasons to be cheerful from the news this year, Sofie, what's been the best part of the year for you?
You can't say me.
I can't.
Not befriending
God.
Mark.
Focus
Then
elsewhere.
what do I say? What's the best
Was it
part?
your show?
I think
You took a new show up to Edinburgh.
I love my new show. Last year I started a podcast and that's gone well. But I think in general, if I had to make it, because there's a lot of little tiny things. But in general, I think this was the year where I started truly believing in my gut feeling. In this career, it's kind of weird. You have to make all these decisions. And I think at the beginning of this year, I said, okay, this is the year where, because so far my gut feelings has been proven to be right every time, but I've still gone, no, I should probably do it anyways. Or, this the logistics are probably better with this one. But then this year, I've just gone with my gut, and that's proven to be the best choice.
That sounds terrifying to me.
But it is, because you go, oh, no one's gonna, my agent's gonna be very angry with me for saying no to this, for saying yes to that. But it does, so far, it's proven to be the right choice.
That could just be luck, though. I've done a lot of things on gut this year, and it hasn't gone well. I'll be honest.
Maybe your guts are just not as accurate.
Thanks very much.
And Mark, you were marooned on an island this year. Is that your highlight?
It certainly wasn't a highlight at the time, but it probably was the most, or one of the things I've done with the most kind of long-term positive consequences, because I learned quite a lot about being. It wasn't actually that long. It's 22 days.
And this is on Channel 4. It's a Bear Grylls thing.
Yes, it's been and gone now on TV, but it's the sort of thing that I would have considered beyond my capacity probably as a human. In a way, it sort of was. I didn't come out of it that well, but I did survive it. And I learned quite a lot about the fact that you can basically take more than you think you can, and you are stronger than you think. And also, the key thing I learned is that the things that you need to be happy are relatively simple, like just good people around you. And if I just have normal food now or just sleep in a normal bed, I think this is a lot better than when I was being eaten by sandflies that time. And so perspective, I suppose, but what is weird is that was in the middle of the year. And I coming back, I thought, I'll never again forget how blessed my life is and how fortunate I am despite all my hang-ups and stuff. But to remind yourself of that is almost daily.
How long did it take before you were standing waiting for a coffee and it was taking too long and you were getting annoyed?
But why do I have to give you my name even? It was probably less than 48 hours. No, actually, for at least a week or two afterwards, I really was in a kind of like someone in a film that had come in from a sort of parallel universe, just marvelling at everything. But yeah, pretty soon, your stresses and irritations, the normal ones, do kick in. The difference is I've still got that. I can now kind of access that bit of my brain I've still got that perspective, but it's much harder than you have these sort of epiphanies or life lessons and you think, I've changed now, but
so
actually
hard,
you have to keep exercising that.
Maybe
sort of
you and
muscle.
I should go and live on an island together.
I was thinking about this.
It's a natural progression from the podcast, I think. Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't think either of us are the type of people who would do very well in a post-apocalyptic world.
Well, you find people quite difficult, and there wouldn't be that many of them.
There literally
That's
were
true, it
not
does
many
sound
at all.
amazing.
No.
Yeah, I find people difficult, and
Well, you'd love the island. There's 15 and that's your lot.
yeah, I'm not sure that you would be great at
No.
building a bivouac or whatever.
I'd be disastrous.
You don't do
honestly.
well with inanimate objects.
It would be sort of inanimate object hell, I think.
I was the same though. In a way, the best thing you can do is be a good team player and be good at fostering relationships with other people. You quite quickly learn. Like there's a doctor.
I would be terrible.
There's you'd be screwed, mate. But someone like Ed with experience of managing a large team, I think you'd at
But
least.
it's a bit
know.
like when somebody needs a fish caught and you say, my job's not to catch the fish, it's to foster relationships.
Yeah. My job is
People
to.
might be quite irritated.
I was a bit like that, to be honest. Not on purpose, but I definitely was the person that kind
I know we can't eat a fostering relationship, but you know.
Yeah. Your job is to produce statistics showing that fish have been caught.
Well, shall we start looking at the year then?
Let's do that.
We have things from each month, and we will decide.
I mean,
whether
let's be honest. We should, just to be honest with people, it's been quite difficult in some months to find cheerful things, but it hasn't been the best.
A couple of them are clutching at straws a bit.
So January, unfortunately, Donald Trump was inaugurated, but there was a massive protest against him, including the Women's March, which took place not just in America, but in cities around the world, including London. 1 million people turned out in Washington. And I sort of think this is a reason to be cheerful, not Donald Trump being inaugurated, but I think it marked the beginning of the sort of resistance to him. and I think it will also mark something else about 2017, which is women, using their voice, not just in relation to Donald Trump, Me Too, all of that, to kind of stand up and make their voices heard. And I think that is something to be positive about.
Did you go on the march, Sofie?
No, I was in Dubai.
Really?
The capitalist superhaven.
So they
women-loving Dubai.
They didn't have a women's march in Dubai.
I couldn't find
then.
one. I couldn't find one. No, I was in Dubai, but I was there by spirit. Does that count? No one doesn't
really.
count. No, doesn't count.
They measured it by people being there, I think.
Oh, that's so annoying when they do that.
My wife and mother-in-law went on the march, but
you see,
they came back quite quickly. My wife doesn't do well in crowds.
She was in the London March.
Yes, yeah, and
Right.
they started squabbling. I can't remember what happened, but there was some kind of disharmony. I think they managed about 25 minutes on the Women's March, but if it's 25 minutes, it's something, isn't it?
If you don't do well in crowds, marches are traditionally quite a bad place to be, I think.
Yeah. Are you a marcher generally, Sofie?
I'm a march intender. I always really want to go. I click attend on Facebook, and then it's a lot of people, isn't it? It's just a lot of people, and a lot of confident people, shouty people, and I'm,
I heard the march was quite shouty.
It's quite shouty,
Yeah.
but it also just like a lot of white women wearing these vagina hats. Did you see them?
Yes.
The pink vagina hats, which is a lie for a lot of people. That's become a very white feminist thing, isn't it? Where it's because they're equating women with vaginas, which is not true for trans women, and then it's also a very white thing because they're pink, which isn't even true for a lot of white women. So it became this kind of white feminist march, which was a bit.
Do you have a better suggestion for hats?
I bet. No.
It's difficult, isn't
It's
it?
really difficult. Well, we
So
don't
you-
have to. Why do we have to have hats?
Yeah, maybe just come with your normal head, yeah.
But don't you think that it is significant that lots of people saw Trump being elected, they might not have been politically active, and in a way, despite the terrible things he said about women and all of the things he said about, race and all of that, but in a way it did have a galvanizing effect on people.
Yeah, it was powerful.
Whatever the nature of the hats,
Yeah.
despite the hat. I mean, it did have that effect, and that is at least, action produces reaction.
And then if you look at how the year has gone in terms of women's movements, maybe that was a spark.
I think maybe it's also seen in the light of where we are now, where that seems almost like a tiny thing compared to women's voices now, which have just been louder and louder and louder and more listened to. So maybe now it's like, oh yeah, women's march, of course. But maybe back then when it happened, it was more of it felt bigger. But now it's like, yeah, we're all marching every single day in our own houses and we're speaking up. And that's really...
And what do you think about the Me Too movement and its impact in 2017?
I am so excited. I have a friend who every time a new name gets called out, she calls me and she just goes, "It's the reckoning." And she hangs back up. It's amazing. I have a segment on my podcast where it's called the act of disobedience. So my listeners send in when they've, fought against the system in some kind of minor way. And there's so many people who say, I'm suddenly empowered. And now, someone catcalled me and I shouted back at them. There was a woman who was, a man shouted something awful at her from his, convertible. And she just bought a 6-pack of Coke. So she just thought, you know what? No. So she started opening the cans, throwing them into his car, just one by one. And then the light turned green and he had to drive. And I was like, that is amazing. And that, to me,
wonderful.
That's 2017.
Do you want to distance yourself from this at all, Jeff?
I just want to be very clear here. I don't have a driving license, so it
and thank
definitely wasn't
goodness.
me.
Just saying.
And in a way, it came out of one long suppressed scandal around Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, that
and
was
it
the
has
first one, wasn't
sparked, and people are very negative about the internet and the Twitter and all of that, but I don't think it would have happened in the way it did without social media.
No. Well, Me Too started about 10 years ago from Tarana Burke. So it's been around, but it hasn't had the social media thing and the celebrities speaking out. And I guess, maybe what started with the march and, that whole, right, it's time now. And then because I think women have been speaking up for ages, but then every time we have done, people have silenced us. And that was part of the Weinstein thing as well, was every time she tried to talk about it, he would silence her and make sure she didn't get parts in movies. But then something has shifted, and now, Twitter, Facebook, it's all out there, and it's just amazing.
I also think the forward effect is incalculable. There is obviously a massive issue with the reckoning, as you say, about what's happened in the past, but there's also a forward effect that is going to be in the minds of men who were previously misbehaving. I would have thought it's going to be a massive deterrent, is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, that was my thought as well, because I didn't dare to believe that there would be consequences. I was like, that's too good to be true. Like, these men are probably not going to be sent away, because that's probably still not the world we live in. But if it means that these men from now on are terrified of doing anything, then that's probably all. And also, if women know that from now on we have to gather evidence and we have to go to the police immediately, because maybe now we will be believed. I mean, for the future, it looks quite good. I think I don't dare to say it.
You say that nervously.
I'm so nervous.
It's a good.
I don't want to tempt fate.
Exactly. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. Well, there we go. That's January, and a big reason to be cheerful there.
Yeah, definitely.
What have we got for February?
February was a difficult month, I think it's fair to say. And maybe that's true of lots of months. But
because we're doing this against the backdrop of 2017 being an awful year and trying to find the good bits.
But people will remember the mix-up over who won the Oscar Best Picture. But the winner was Moonlight, which was a small-budget film, which was a story about race and homophobia. And we saw the first Muslim actor to win an Oscar when he won Best Supporting Actor. It came after the previous year when we'd had the hashtag Oscars So White on Twitter. Now, the Oscars are the Oscars, but I think it did at least send some kind of signal just about, ending that monocultural way that the Oscars had previously been seen.
I feel awful because I haven't seen it.
But Mark has seen it.
Yeah, I feel more awful because I have seen it and I did like it, but not as much as it would be. It would be convenient if it had been the best film I'd ever seen. Because I could do a really impassioned 10 minutes about it now. But yeah. I had one of those awkward things with it where I watched it, thought I enjoyed that was good, and I watched it on someone had recommended it to me. I didn't discover it on the radar, but nonetheless, it had not yet had the Oscar attention. I don't think so. I must have seen it early in the year. Once it has won the award, it became kind of universally lauded. I started thinking, it's like this with anything, isn't it? You see something or hear an album, whatever it is, and think, yeah, that was good. And then 6 months later, it's regarded as sort of one of the major pieces of art this century. And you think, now, did I miss something? Or did I just see it with different expectations from those people? Or is the film's new cultural, social significance, is that what people are really talking about? If so, that's fine. Yeah. But basically, I just purely saw it as a low budget film, and but also the Oscars are the Oscars. I mean, I thought it was obviously progress in a lot of ways, but and the mix up thing was tremendous fun. We won't see something like that happen again for a long time.
Well, as people who perform on stage, for a living, is that a gratifying thing to see somebody else mess up?
It was great because nothing we can mess up in our lives will be as big as that. I don't think. We're basically everyone that ever has to read something out on stage is off the hook now. Even if that award ceremony that Ed mentioned that I was at, I would have had to do a really bad job before it was the worst thing done at an award ceremony this year.
I once accidentally gave away a car on the radio to somebody who hadn't won.
I mean, that is a big mix up. Yeah.
Did you have to tell them?
So what happened was I was doing some competition where I was giving away a Mini, and there were two people. They had to guess a number. I don't know. Say, for example, it was how many miles from London to Manchester, and they each guessed. And I'm terrible at arithmetic, so I had a producer on the other side of the room, kind of indicating which person had won. So say it was Mark and Sofie, and I'm sort of seeing which way his hand's going. I think, okay, I've got it. All right, well done, Sofie. And she's going, she's so happy that she's won a car. And at the same time, see all the colour drain from the producer's face, and he's doing the thing, slitting his throat sign with his. And I realise I've given it to the wrong person. So what do you do in that situation?
You stick with it.
You have to give them your car, presumably.
What I did is I just went, you can both have one.
Yeah, that's all you could do.
And then they had to find an extra however many £1,000 it was to buy another
cost
Mini.
to show a car.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I did an award show where it was in Denmark, but it was international, and the person who had sent out the email was Danish and not that good at English. So what she had meant to email all of these international companies was, if you do win, we need to know how many people get up on stage to accept the award. What she'd said was, when you win, so all these companies that couldn't afford to go abroad were like, but we will win the award, so we should be there.
Oh no!
So they'd all turned up, and then as the award ceremony progressed, people started sensing like, wait, We didn't win that one.
It was like that for me at the old awards.
Yeah, hang on. When
Hang on a
it's
minute.
my moment.
I thought I was coming because I was winning, not to come second here.
Yeah, I wouldn't have come just to sit here.
So did you have a revolution on your hands then?
But I was like because I didn't know this, and then around when there was 6 awards left, the people running it like ran up to me and just went, just go through it quickly, like don't speak in between them. So I was just like, winner of this is that, winner of this and that, winner, good night. And then people were just sitting there like rageful, and I was like,
I must say, I nearly stormed the stage.
Could you feel hostility in the room as you were doing it?
Yeah, I could feel there was like people started chatting a bit, but I wasn't really sure what was happening. I just thought, oh, they're drunk or they're tired. I didn't know that they were all going, we traveled from South Africa to win an award.
So I did say to Ed, if they invite you and you say, I'm not sure if I can make it, and then they come back and say, no,
We'd really like you to be there.
Yeah, then you've definitely won. But it turns out I was wrong.
I think what I found odd about the whole thing is that, as I said, there's no doubt that it's really great that Moonlight won. It's great that the guy won as well, because an awful lot of people do look at that as the sort of like a lot of young black actors, black filmmakers will have seen that. But beyond it, I have this overarching frustration with the idea of the Oscars as a benchmark of quality art, because I basically don't. I mean, it's not that good films don't get Oscars, but the circus around it, what dresses people are wearing, this totally film has got Oscars buzz this year, the cult of personality, all of it screams the sort of Hollywood climate of permissiveness that this scandal has come out of. So for me, bigger progress would be just if loads more black filmmakers got recognition without having to, because there can only be one Best Picture award every year. It's the same with everything. Maybe not the Mercury Awards or the Booker, but like almost all awards, it's necessary because it's good to celebrate good art and stuff. But I know you won an award, but
Sofie won Best Newcomer at the Edinburgh Fringe. Did you ever win the Edinburgh Fringe, Mark?
I won the panel prize, Jeff, which is for people who do weird stuff, but ultimately not that funny. And I've won Celebrity Pointless twice. What do you want? Actually, it's funny.
Have you really?
I have, yeah.
Wow.
I've got a nice little collection of Pointless and Mastermind trophies, but it's funny what Ed was saying about your trophy, some of Jeff's trophies being out of date.
Yeah.
There's a point in your career where you're not really going to win awards anymore. So I've got a shelf full of I've got several, but they're all noticeably 2005, 2006. I'm pushing them further and further
it's
back.
Like when you go to a restaurant and they've got an Egon Runno sticker in the window from 1998, and you're thinking, you're probably doing more harm than good with that sticker at this point.
Or a picture of me when I was label lead.
So yeah, I do think that it was great, but I sometimes feel that the whole emphasis on the Oscars is a bit wearying, because so much good stuff gets made that doesn't. And I don't want to be,
no, you're right,
because you have to have things like the Oscars, but the way they're presented is, I find it quite kind of marginalising of a lot of other stuff. Still, it is good that it's definitely good that it won over La La Land.
Okay, March. So March was Britain triggered Article 50 to leave the European Union, but the European Union celebrated 60 years since the signing of the Treaty of Rome, which laid the foundations for the European Union as we know it today. And I think that is a reason to be cheerful, even though we're leaving.
Yeah, bittersweet, this one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit bittersweet, but we couldn't go through the year without mentioning Brexit. And, the fact that I think I'm right in saying that in 1957, of the 28 countries in the European Union, only 12 were democracies. Now 28 are democracies. Some of them going in slightly odd directions.
Yeah, look what happens.
Not just Britain. But the European Union has delivered all kinds of things, peace, prosperity.
But do you think that's part of the problem? People, for a lot of people, they didn't know what the European Union was doing, and all these benefits they'd had over the years in terms of what they were getting in workers' rights or clean air or whatever. They didn't know it was coming from the EU, and yet we've had newspapers blaming all our woes on the EU for 30 years.
Yeah, look, I'm sure that is true. And it is, as Mark says, it's definitely bittersweet. Having said that, we want, even outside the European Union, we want a strong European Union. And we want a European Union that is succeeding because it's in our interests as well. And the fact that it's got to 60 years, this sort of concept, I think it does say something. What about Denmark? Because you've had quite mixed feelings about the European Union, haven't you?
Yeah, we still have the krona. We refuse to have the euro.
But people support membership. And in fact, I think I'm right in saying that Brexit has actually massively increased support for the European Union in all the countries that aren't Brexiting.
We are kind of laughing at you. Kind of.
To put it another way.
Yeah. We are a bit like,
to be blunt.
That's ridiculous. But then there's a lot of Danish people in the UK going, no. Oh, no. What are we going to do? Can I stay? I don't even know what what's going to actually happen.
But is your sense that people are more supportive of the EU now that Britain is leaving in Denmark?
I think so. I think it's like if you if you're in a relationship and then suddenly someone comes and flirts with your husband of 60 years. I think you're a bit like, oh, he's mine. no, go away. I think we've learned to appreciate it a bit more. I know you're not flirting with my husband, but you're
we're negging him, if anything.
But you're not really, because then you voted leave. Forgive me stupidly, and then now everyone's talking a lot about how you want the EU back. How you're all like, no, we shouldn't have been there. We're all regretting the decision. People voted for the wrong thing. No, we want it back, and we're like, no.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So you sort of. It's kind of the post-match reaction is confirming among people in Denmark.
Yeah.
Growing up, like, what would a typical Danish relationship with the EU be? Because I feel like here, there's always been a lot of, they can't tell us what to do. Is that something you've noticed as prevalent in Denmark?
Not really. I don't remember anything.
There was the referendum, though, wasn't there, in Denmark?
About the currency?
Yeah, that was the currency. And then people got quite a bit, quite patriotic about the krona because the queen is on our money. But that was mostly like the right-wing side of things. So most people didn't really care. The people that I was speaking to, I mean, I was a child, but I still remember it being a bit like, yeah, but it's more efficient. Like, let's just get the... But then the people who love the queen kind of won, as they usually do. But I think generally I don't remember anything bad being said about the EU, because we're a tiny, tiny, tiny country. We know we can't make it on our own. We have to be part of something. We've learned that now from...
Luckily, we're an international superpower.
Maybe that's what comes with calling yourself an empire.
It probably is, but I have to say, I don't think people were saying anything bad about the EU here a few years ago. It was like the Euroscepticism was still seen as kind of I didn't ever think it would come to a point where it was a national conversation. Not really. I would have said most people broadly thought, you'd hear about like Brussels interfering and
bananas.
But it was the sort of thing that only a certain section of the population ever bothered to get cross about. I think most of us just assumed there were probably good reasons for being part of a federal Europe. Yeah, so never mind.
It's amazing if you look at the polling on it, though. People didn't care.
Yeah.
Until a relatively short time before the referendum, right?
Yeah.
But that's the extraordinary thing about what Cameron did, and that's that he turned an issue that probably 15 or 20% of people cared about into one to which people attached themselves on either side. It became 70 or 75% of people who cared, sort of, who attached themselves to each side.
It's the most incredible thing about it. It's not a referendum that ever had to take place. And I remember... I didn't, unlike most communities, I wasn't that vocal about it in the run-up to it, basically because I thought I remember spending like half a day reading the economic pros and cons of leaving to try and be open-minded about it. In the end, I thought, no one really understands this, including economists. So I remember my sole tweet about it was, why are we having a vote on this? I don't believe that anyone, apart from a tiny number of people, qualified. Surely this is the reason we have government to make these decisions. And
you're basically saying, Mark, that's why Brexit won, aren't you? If only you'd been more vocal, it would have been all right.
It's one of a series of crises that could have been averted if I'd just been bolder.
Yeah. People are holding you responsible for your failure to campaign and to get out on the campaign trail. I'm afraid.
It's been a tough couple of years, actually.
I mean, look, I didn't want to kind of, raise it.
No,
now that you have.
I have to hold my hands up.
There's a lot of people sort of saying this. Why was Mark Watson not out there?
A lot of it, same with Trump. There's a lot of stuff which, if I had just used my considerable influence, maybe I need to be more like Sofie, have a gut feeling and just go
with it. All the wars I've stopped.
Exactly, Well, we don't know what...
Where were you in the referendum, Lloydie?
Yeah. If we're talking about people that didn't take enough action. You had a national radio show, mate. That's a platform.
Yeah, so that's my get out, isn't it? I had to be completely neutral
about
it.
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, though, on commercial radio?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're still bound by
Ofcom rules, I suppose. Anything to do with elections and referenda. And
there you go. Yeah. How convenient.
Yeah,
our podcast came too late.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Earlier.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, if you had this podcast while you were doing the election, for example, that would have been a different vote you were tapping into. But it would have been seen as a conflict of interest, I suppose. Again.
Yeah. But I knew. I called it. I knew which way it was going to go.
Did you?
I wish I'd put some money on leave, because then it maybe would have made the next day a bit less painful.
Yeah, which is what I did, in fact, but it didn't make it much less painful.
You called
it's
it.
A hollow. Several times in my life I've bet on bad outcomes just for sort of as a sort of insurance.
So you bet on leave?
I had 20 quid on it during the night when it went to 11 to 2 or something, about 100 quid, which sounds good, but weighed against the
You'd prefer
permanent
to be
ill
a-
health of our nation. Yeah, it wasn't. I've started doing it. I have done it in the past with football a lot. So essentially, if you lose, you at least still get a. So
Who's your team?
Bristol City, and we've had an
Right.
excellent season. So this year, I've basically been subsidising that because I've had a number of losing bets on. But of course, you feel hollow. You don't like. It just
You don't want to bet against your team.
You don't want to bet against your team, but you're just doing it to protect yourself from sort of. You get maniacs that bet on their team
So basically
to
it's a
win,
form of
which means that you're doubly disappointed
It's
if you.
basically what you've revealed in this conversation is a form of match fixing. You decided not to campaign in the referendum, thereby making a leave vote more likely, and then you bet on a leave vote.
Yeah, match fixing is
I mean,
a big term. Ed.
In Australian cricket, you'd be banned for life.
Yeah, if I did have a huge influence on the Brexit vote, then this would be match fixing. Yeah, but again, I was under the illusion that the vote would sort of take care of itself. Really, if I'd known how important I was, this is come back to this again and again.
Should we move on to April?
This is a good news story.
This is a good one, I think. This went under the radar.
So, on the 21st of April, Britain went a full day without using coal power to generate electricity for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, according to the national grid. And this is part of a bigger story, which is that coal accounts for 9% of electricity generation in 2016 compared to nearly 25% from renewables. And that is a big revolution. Now, I should say I'm from a former coal mining constituency.
I was just going to ask about this.
So it is difficult. I wish the government was investing in clean coal because you can have so-called carbon capture and storage. And I think the coal that we are burning is imported coal. I still think we could be burning coal from Britain. Having said that, coal which isn't cleaned up does contribute in a big way to global warming. So sort of net, this is a good news story, and it's part of a wider thing that's been happening on climate change in 2017, which is this big movement around so-called divestment. So the big institutions saying they're going to stop investing in oil and gas companies. So this year, the World Bank announced it was no longer going to subsidize oil and gas projects from new oil and gas exploration from 2019. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is $1 trillion, I think. It's like 1% of the world's stocks and shares, the equivalent of, just very recently said it was going to stop investing in oil and gas.
Weird, because that comes from oil, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And Norway made its money on oil and gas, but it's made it, it's recognized the change that needs to happen. It's happening
Scandinavians are so reasonable.
It's happening in New York. It's happened actually. The British government has announced a change in our pension fund rules to make this possible. So, and this is like a big movement, this divestment movement, and that is definitely a reason to be cheerful in 2017.
I do think it's interesting what you said about being from what I mean. You don't have to sort of specifically appeal to Labour voters now, but what would you say what do you say when you've got like Labour heartlands where people feel like coal was the heart of their community, but you know full well that it is a step forward to not make as much of it?
Look, as I say, when I was Energy Secretary, I was trying to pioneer this thing called carbon capture and storage, which would have cleaned it up.
Do you think that is feasible?
Well, I think it could be. I think
it
it could be feasible, but overall, what's the answer? I think people in my constituency would say, look, the mines have gone.
Yeah.
But they've got to be replacement jobs of similar quality. Why don't we have the renewable energy providers, based in constituencies like mine? So it's fighting for those new jobs that will replace the old ones.
That is the answer, I think, because it's difficult, isn't it? Across the world, it's the same in Australia, everywhere you see these arguments where politicians are having to defend the idea of cleaner energy to people who are think, but my livelihood entirely depends on, and it is possible but it's an entire mentality shift. Like you say, people need to think they can have jobs in the energy sector without that meaning actual coal, basically.
I've always thought that the way you've got to sell this environmental cause is not just on environmental grounds, although this is incredibly important, and we're going to talk about Blue Planet a bit later, and which has exposed some of the issues there, but sell it as an economic issue as well. That this is the industry of the future.
I do feel like people are starting to get behind that.
Starting to.
Possibly.
And it's interesting that in a year when Trump has threads through this conversation, in a year when Trump has been such a shitbag on kind of a lot of issues.
It's the term.
There was no struggling for that term either. It was right there.
It's the obvious term.
Including on climate change, pulling out of Paris.
Yeah.
There's been this countervailing movement, hasn't there?
People have stood up. The international community stood up to him really well on environmental issues, I think, hopefully because we are too far advanced with stuff like the Paris Agreement for even Trump to be able to entirely, shit on that. Yeah.
We need a firm commitment from Father Christmas that he's not going to keep giving lumps of coal to naughty children. It needs to be replaced with something renewable.
It should be renewable battery or something instead. Yeah.
And that's the other thing, by the way, this I could bore on about this for hours, but the battery technology, the advances that we're seeing in that, it's a lot of it seems to be ahead of schedule. And there, countries like we talk about Norway a lot, but we did a feature on this, I think, about how Norway is moving on electric cars and so on. So I think in this area China is taking it incredibly seriously. So I think there are reasons to be cheerful in this area.
Although I do miss those little square batteries you could lick.
What?
You never licked a battery, Sophie?
No, what? Go
A
on.
little square battery that you could lick.
Maybe-
You used to get them in a lot of things.
I mean, you can
maybe not in Denmark,
technically
but-
you can technically lick everything, but that doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, you're allowed to still lick them in your own time, Jeff.
You get a little shock, though.
Oh,
'cause
yeah,
they
when you
have
put
both
your
terminals
tongue between
at
the
top.
two. But those batteries still exist.
But you don't see them so much anymore. They were very prevalent. And now
Well, a lot of people die, Jeff.
I love how Mark just looked at me and like shook his head, like, no, don't do it. Don't do
Yeah,
it.
I do know of this phenomenon,
Knowing
but
that
it's
my
just quite
thought
rare
was
you
like,
meet a
I'm gonna go
survivor
home
of this fad.
You've never licked. I wish we had a battery here so we could get.
I
you to
don't
lick
think
it.
she'd
Not
do
sure.
it.
No, are you saying
very-
I'm scared? You're saying I'm a chicken? I'll do it.
It's a very low level shock. It's
Yeah.
a very low level shock.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Talking of shocks, did you see, by the way, that Kim Kardashian won the...
I never thought you'd be up to date on Kim Kardashian. news.
Remarkable segue this from Miliband.
She won the Statistic of the Year award from the Royal Statistical Society for her tweet saying that I think it's 65 people a year got killed by lawnmowers in the United States compared to 2 had been killed by Islamic terrorism. Did you see
Very
this?
good. The National Statistics Association are all over the Kardashians, aren't they? It's a real love-in.
Like, you've been less speechless by that, Jeff. The lawnmower.
I'm speechless that you had a news story involving Kim Kardashian.
I mean, it is
I wouldn't have had you
it's
down
quite a
as a fan.
stato one, though, isn't it?
It is, but it's combining two of your favourite things. Then
The Kardashians and statistics. Yeah. You know my secret, Jeff.
Should we move on to May?
You go, why don't you do May?
Okay, so May was the month when the horrific attack on the Manchester Arena happened. But we thought a good reason to be cheerful for that month would be Manchester's response to that attack at the Ariana Grande concert. I don't know if people will remember the videos that went viral of people gathering in Albert Square in Manchester, spontaneously breaking into Oasis songs, which is a marvellous thing. And then there was this huge concert that Ariana Grande staged at the Manchester Arena, which I think was the largest TV audience of the year. 22 million people watched it. And it was just a great example of a city coming together, and actually a country coming together off the back of something horrible, kind of designed to spread fear.
I also thought that out of the horrific series of terrorist attacks that we saw during the year, I actually think the response of the British people was incredibly impressive. I mean, not just the first responders, the people who went to the scene and all of that, but I think the kind of stoicism of most people to get on with their lives, whether it's in Manchester or London or wherever it happened. I think in a year when people are quite negative about parts of what's happened in Britain, I thought it said something rather positive about us, actually.
There was that photo of the man fleeing from a pub with a full beer, and he was trying not to spill.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's where I live.
Classically British image.
Yeah. And I never even knew about Ariana Grande. I consider myself a fan.
So it's
now.
a minor positive, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. I mean, some of these things are a reach, I'll be honest.
But don't you think there was that stoicism?
Well, yeah. It's a funny thing about it's just, again, it's slightly bittersweet that we are, as a nation, we're definitely at our best when under attack. I mean, it's a weird thing, isn't it? People often talk about the wartime spirit and stuff like that. There's no doubt we're very good at rallying in times of hardship. You just wish that we could harness some of that, the sort of positivity and love that was around that concert. I mean, of course, you can't do that every day, but you sometimes wish it didn't take a tragedy to make everyone work together as a nation as well. Because at times of that, you think, famously, as a nation, we've got far more in common than, but it's just so, of course,
as
you can't live.
Said, but also, don't you think we also saw that in the 2012 Olympics? Don't you think that spirit was there?
I literally remember saying to people, this is a potential turning point for the country. It was such a purely global event, and we were so proud of being, and that's almost exactly 4 years before
And
Brexit vote.
It felt modern as well.
Yeah.
There was like all this stuff about Britain's history and cultural history, but it felt modern and outward looking as well.
It was one of the times I've felt genuinely, well, not exactly proud to be British, but proud of what British people were doing.
I completely agree.
It's astonishing to think that was only 5 years ago.
But exactly. But in a way, the spirit that existed in 2012 still exists now, but also the anger that was expressed in the Brexit referendum was there then, if you see what I mean.
Both true, yeah. We're a strange country, really. In a way, they're two sides of the same coin. Part of why the Olympics went so well was because we were determined to show what a great country we were on some level. And in that case, it was to do with celebrating achievement, welcoming the world. In a way, the same mentality that wants to make everyone welcome also wants people to back off a bit.
Also, I sort of maybe make myself unpopular with some people by saying this. The people in my constituency voted for Brexit. Lots of them voted for it because they wanted something more positive about the country. You know what I mean?
That is true, yeah.
It wasn't just a negative vote. It was a vote to say, I want a new beginning. I want things to be better. Now, we can have our own views about whether we think that is going to be deliverable under Brexit and, where Brexit is going. But I think, funnily enough, there is an optimism in it.
Yeah, it's
you know
true.
what I mean? Behind some of the people who voted as they did.
Yeah, people want it. Brexit vote won because people. I think if you summed it all up, people here have an unusually strong sense of Britain being a thing. As you say, a lot of that is negative. It's to do with empire. It's to do with a sense of or privilege, whatever. But it does mean that at times we can really get our shit together and do big national things. And at times we can also do quite unwise things. It does weirdly come from the same place, which is people wanting Britain to be on the map. It's funny though, I was recently in Japan. If you go to almost anywhere else in the world and you see a world map where Britain isn't at the centre, it's hard to even find it on the map.
Right.
And you do sort of think, you can see why other countries think we're sort of weirdly up ourselves, because you literally, if you ask where Birmingham was here, you're in, it sort of isn't on the map at all.
Yeah.
There's an office in Soho where they've got one of those maps that cover the whole wall, a world map, but the Britain is on sort of a joint, so it literally isn't there at all. And seeing it, I saw it just after the Brexit vote. It felt like a metaphor for us having removed ourselves from the world.
And yet we definitely, I know it's a cliche, but we definitely punch above our weight around the world. That's why some people find it so tragic what we're doing.
We've tended to punch hugely above our weight in both good and bad ways, basically. Like, we've got a sense of our own importance that is massively inflated partly because of our arts and cultural history, but also because of our history of sort of beating up other people. And now all that's come to a head, basically. It's a weird thing. We're a weird country.
So we'll have the response to the Manchester attacks. Did everybody watch the concert, by the way?
I didn't watch it.
I saw some of it.
Great.
I didn't actually.
I felt that the whole country got behind the fact that Liam Gallagher used it as a platform to do his new single, and then just sort of turned on him on Twitter.
That was an astonishing decision.
I know.
Of all the now for some new stuff moments in concerts, that really was a big call. Yeah.
All right, that's May. On to June.
So June, I think we have to do the general election.
There was an election.
And, I think there are reasons to be cheerful about the election. Different people have different views about the result. But I think it certainly tore up the rule book on how people, perform well in elections. Jeremy Corbyn was given no chance at the beginning, got hung parliament. Increased Labour's share of the vote by more than any Labour leader since Attlee. Turnout was a 25-year high. Young people turned out more than they had before. A big increase on 2015. So I think I certainly think there are reasons to be cheerful about that. And you were on an island for most of the campaign.
It was weird. I was oblivious to most of the campaigning. Came back a week before the election, and most of us were either actively Labour voters or at least hoping for some sort of progress towards it. And but obviously most of us were quite negative, apart from the bloke from Rizzle Kicks, Jordan, his name was.
Oh, right.
He gave me a lot of lectures about how, in particular, like members of the black community coming out and on Twitter and stuff like that, and encouraging people to mobilise would make a huge difference. And I was basically saying, I just don't think that. Like, it wasn't I disagreed with it. It wasn't I thought that section of the vote was irrelevant. I think going into this election, I wouldn't have believed that social media alone could do enough to change the picture.
This was in
even
between
slightly.
failing to catch fish, basically.
Yeah, this was in these moments where you haven't eaten anything for 4 days and you're thinking about death, and then your thoughts briefly turn to the political climate, and
And no mobile phones, no mobile phones, no emails, no texts.
nothing. Your only distraction really is you've got several thousand sort of horsefly bites on your skin. So occasionally you would try and talk about other stuff. So we talked about the election a fair bit, and he, again, being much younger than me, he was saying there was no one like Stormzy or whoever agitating before the last elections. I was saying I feared that it would have the opposite effect almost, or at least because we saw with Trump, there was a gigantic effort by the left, certainly in America, to discredit him, and it only galvanised the support he had. I thought we were going to see a similar thing here.
Something
again.
about lovies getting involved, gets people's backs up.
Or Brexit again. I was saying to him, look, the last 2 big votes, we've seen a massive social media campaign essentially swing it the wrong way. But in this case, I was wrong.
But isn't that also something about 2017, which is the voice of young people? I mean, we've talked a bit about the voice of women, whether it's in Me Too or the opposition to Trump, but I think the voice of young people, both in the US and particularly the UK, sort of coming out post-Brexit, turning out to vote, getting behind a sort of radical new departure which Corbyn was seeking to offer, I think is significant.
Really significant. I was supportive of Corbyn, but I was sceptical that not necessarily that the young market could be tapped into. I just didn't think it would be enough to alter the voting picture as much. I don't think anyone thought it, to be fair. And it was genuinely quite exciting to watch. Although, again, you sort of, as you say, it's really weird because still the Tories did win the election, and Corbyn has sort of spoken as if he now is the Prime Minister ever since. So we're in a peculiar hinterland now. It was a night of near euphoria for Labour fans, but then things don't feel that different, except I suppose they are because this government is hanging on by a thread. You just forget that at times.
Sofie, do you get to vote here?
No.
So is it
I
just
did try.
Did you really?
I signed up and they were like, sure, we'll send you your card. I was like, oh my God. But then the card came and they were like, no, I can't. No.
Worth a try, though.
Well, it's right. I mean,
So is
yeah.
it fun as a spectator sport then, watching an election campaign?
I mean, it's never fun, is it? Because that's, I think the whole thing is that we've lost kind of hope that, because of the last 2 votes, you're like, I can't have another morning of waking up and going, oh no, not again. So I don't know if it was fun. It's been weird trying to figure out how politics in this country work.
I'm still working on that.
Yeah, no one knows.
So there isn't a British version of Borgen that they show in Denmark.
But then you have people saying, because you'll hear people just saying random things and you'll go, wait, what? So someone said, I really hope it's not going to be raining because then we'll lose. And I was like, what, is that some kind of superstition? They're like, no, because if it's raining, people don't want to queue outside of the voting polls. So then, people just don't vote.
That is astonishing. The fact that makes it that much
Because
difference.
people just
I know
It's
you
like
never
a
know
fact.
whether that's myth or not. They would say the Labour voters are less likely to turn out in the rain. I'm not sure.
But it does seem so old-fashioned. So I got a ballot through for a political party thing the other day, and it's so much easier and very secure to vote in those things. You get 2 separate codes that you need to put in online. It tallies up with the polling card that you get, and then you can do a vote at home. And it just going and queuing at a little primary school feels like it belongs to a different
we're having
era.
this poll in Doncaster about whether we want what kind of devolution we want, whether we want Yorkshire or South Yorkshire, and I did it online, and I had exactly the same reaction. It was so easy.
So why can't a general election be easy like that? It certainly improved turnout or the amount of
I
people
agree.
voting.
Anyway, I had fun in the election campaign because I was sort of campaigning mostly in my constituency, and I mowed a lady's lawn.
That's classic
lovely.
campaigning stuff.
Campaigning.
That's actually dangerous. It's more dangerous than terrorism.
Yeah, it could be. As Kim
You should have
Kardashian
spoken to Kim
pointed
before you
out.
did that. It's
in
amateurs doing
in
it.
her
though.
statistic of the year. Anyway, but I think this presence of young people in politics, whichever political party you support, I think young people are now a force to be reckoned with. And you've seen that in some of the Tories' attempt to respond to that, whereas before they were sort of written off, basically.
And is it weird being in a country where it's an either-or situation? It's either really the Tories or Labour, because you're used to a different proportional representation in your votes, and you get these coalitions and people have to work together.
I don't know how much different. It doesn't feel much different, I think. I mean, it does feel different, the attitude towards voting, that is even a question. I think in Denmark, they make it quite easy because you are just sent the ballot, is that what you call it? The ballot. So it the turnout is
Can you vote
huge.
online in Denmark?
No, I don't think so.
Right.
No, not yet, I want to say, but I believe that
Right.
should probably be a thing. But it's just, you just vote. Like in Denmark, you just vote. And that was the weirdest thing. Because it didn't have to be such a... I was kind of puzzled that was the argument. At least vote. I'm like, yeah, of course you're going to vote. It's more about what you vote for. But people were like, no, just get out there.
Right.
But
It was probably the big difference, though. Loads of people voted this time that just didn't bother with the Brexit vote, or with your election, to be fair.
Actually, people who voted in Brexit were also coming back to then vote. And, I just saw in my constituency people who voted for the Brexit for the first time were now voting Labour, and that is significant. Should we do July?
Let's do it.
Now, this is what one I like a lot, which is Jodie Whittaker was announced as the 13th Doctor Who.
Are you a Doctor Who fan, Sofie?
no, I haven't. I haven't seen any of your stuff. Like I'm not. I have not seen Doctor Who. I haven't seen Harry Potter. I haven't seen.
Coronation Street?
No, I saw
News?
No, not really. No,
Okay.
I saw when I was a child. We saw Mrs. Bouquet, Keeping Up Appearances.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. That's my British
Basically,
knowledge.
It's sad that that's our main export.
Basically, you've got Scando Noir, haven't you?
Yeah,
the
so why
killing
would
and
you-
all of that.
Yeah, so why would you even
Right,
venture
I
out
see.
of that?
But are you a Whovian?
Well, actually, not really. I definitely thought it was a good. It was a good appointment, but I thought it from a fairly neutral standpoint. I've sort of dipped into it from time to time, but I've just never. And the thing with Doctor
As
Who
a
is,
child?
well, the thing is, as a child, I think obviously there weren't new ones there, so you'd have been digging back into the old ones, and I was never really initiated into it. by
Oh,
my
I see.
parents,
You were in
like-
the gap, the generation
Yeah,
gap,
I mean,
when
the
it wasn't
generation
on.
didn't really have a flagship Doctor Who because it didn't come back, did it, until I don't know, the late 90s.
Whereas
or something.
Jeff is significantly older than you, so he
Yeah,
obviously.
significantly younger than Ed, but a little older.
Jeff
than
last
you.
week was trying to claim after we switched off the microphones that he was nearly a millennial.
Yeah, borderline
And-
millennial.
Borderline,
And we
yeah.
worked out
Yeah.
that he was 10 years out, but he was born in
Borderline,
73.
yeah.
Millennial South.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Ed is very much from the flower power generation, child of the 60s.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
Jeff
proud
was
of it.
accusing me of being a baby boomer. But you were a Doctor Who fan.
Oh yeah, I love Doctor Who, and I'm so excited.
And yours
about
was
this.
Tom Baker like me, wasn't
Yes,
it?
exactly,
Showing that we're
yeah.
the same generation, basically.
Yeah. I mean, you
Tom
had the
Baker was
early
thankfully
days
a
of-
long-serving
it was a long,
Doctor
yeah, so
Who.
I had the later years of Tom
Yeah,
Baker, and you
yeah.
had the earlier years. He crushed generations in that way.
Yeah, he did,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I was very excited about this, not least because I had a hit tweet off the back of it, which was just thrilling for me.
Oh, there's nothing like a hit tweet.
It was so great. I wrote a tweet.
What was your hit tweet?
My hit tweet was like having a go at all the people who were getting in a tizzy about
Right.
Doctor Who being a woman. So I did a tweet which was basically just like, oh God, Doctor Who won't be the same without him going on about his dick all the time.
I remember that.
Yeah, and it
Your
was
life changed?
Well, listen what happened. Sometimes pubs will have quotes on a blackboard outside. Somebody took my tweet and they slightly sanitized it because, they didn't want dick on it.
Understandable, yeah.
well,
You went viral on blackboards.
I went on, not just on Twitter, but on a blackboard
80s
as well.
style viral.
Yeah. So it was a really, it's great for
But
Jodie
actually,
Whittaker, great for women, great for
I'm
me.
tempted to watch it now.
Do you enjoy watching all the men getting so enraged about the thought of a female, or people getting enraged about the thought of a
No,
female
primarily
doctor?
when men do it. I'm more happy about that. Angry men on Twitter is the funniest thing. So yeah, that's the main reason to enjoy it, just to see grown men crying because they think they're losing something.
It's especially fun with Doctor Who as well because it's not been 100% realistic through the years, has it? They've already taken
The whole
some
time travel
plots-
business.
The time travel business. The fact that he's been lots of different people already.
Yeah.
So saying you can't really be a woman, you're like, well, you can't really be 12 different men though.
Yeah, with two hearts.
With two different hearts, yeah.
Right, August. Now, this is an exciting one for Jeff. Well-known hypochondriac, more of a hypochondriac than me, and I'm a big hypochondriac. Scientists say they have made exciting progress in finding a cure for the common cold. Researchers at Edinburgh and Napier University say treatments can be developed based on antimicrobial peptides that occur naturally in the immune systems of humans and animals.
Anyone would hesitate looking at that.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
So, Jeff,
Well, my first reaction is that I don't believe it. Every year, there is some story about how scientists have invented a cure for the common
come
cold.
on.
Or every
It's
year,
Christmas
there is
time.
some
Kinda
story
go,
about
go along
how
with it.
They've invented a pill where you'll just lose weight just by taking the pill and not need to diet or exercise. And these things never happen.
I mean, it's been a particularly hypochondriacal year for you, hasn't it, if that's a word?
well,
It should be a word. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
I still haven't been to the doctor about whatever's going on with my thumb.
Oh, I saw this on Twitter. Very worried about your
What
thumb.
is the thumb update?
It
Thumbgate.
still doesn't feel quite right.
His thumb doesn't
Yeah.
feel quite right. We all know what that
Yeah,
means.
and I did a Twitter poll. People said it was probably fatal, but I haven't. I've got a list of things that I need to take.
I feel like a
talk to the
GP
doctor
appointment
about.
is better than a Twitter poll for these things.
Yeah,
I mean, but look,
that's right.
there's lots of material in this area. So there was a new analysis out in Canada suggesting that man flu might actually exist. because respiratory illnesses may indeed hit men harder than women. So that's kind of a...
See, we have such difficult lives.
Yeah, exactly. And, I also feel I should sort of mention the fact that it's about a year, this was 2016, but it is relevant, when a stock image of me blowing my nose was used on a US network about people with colds.
So this was the weirdest thing. It was a news story about a cold.
I'll take all the publicity I can get.
And they chose to illustrate it, a picture of you blowing your nose.
Yeah.
You became a poster boy for illness.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Do you
Flu
know?
labour, as I called it. I don't know. Actually, I had a long negotiation with them about the rights to the photo.
Yeah.
I said, look, it's okay.
Have you been to
can do
America
it.
since? And they're like, it's cold guy.
Yeah, it's a big brand to get involved with.
Honestly, I think it could go places. It was a sort of hedge in case the podcast didn't work, Jeff. You see what I mean?
All right, let's move on.
Should we do? I think you should do September.
September was the month we launched this podcast.
Yeah. Now, it's not just a self-referential piece of bollocks, so that we can talk about our own podcast.
It mainly is, to be honest.
It mainly is.
Mainly,
but
not
we
just,
should,
you say.
we should have some cover to suggest it isn't just that, yeah?
Yeah.
So it's a chance to talk about other people's podcasts, the whole phenomenon of podcasting, why is it so successful, not just ours, and, all of that.
Yeah, because Sofie launched an extremely successful podcast, then walked away from it and launched another one.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about that?
It's called Made of Human Podcast, and I think I initially started doing it because I wanted to figure out how to do life, because I had this idea in my head that I was going to sit down with people and be like, so how do you do this being an adult thing?
Like, what's the answer?
Yeah, like, give me some tips. I genuinely thought, like, people must have some kind of knowledge about this. Turns out no one has any idea. No one, the most, important people in the world have no idea. So it just became a conversation with people about how we don't know how to do it. And it became really nice, and it ended up kind of taking a turn, and now it's, I'd say 50% that, 50% being, a bit of an introvert, not really knowing how to do adulting and life. And then it's also...
God, you should have Jeff on, definitely. He's really good on that.
Bit of a sore point, this. I was due to do it yesterday, and she cancelled me as I was putting my shoes on.
Oh, that's the worst time.
Yeah.
Also, particularly as you don't wear your shoes in the house.
Yeah, I know.
That is the last thing you do before he goes out.
A conscious effort to put your shoes on.
That is like the fine line. I'm going to go through the door, because if you have your shoes on in Jeff's house, it's like a big social faux pas. I did it again today. I kind of forgot. There was a whole business with the shoes.
I did feel really bad.
So why?
I felt really bad.
You just found somebody better. Yeah?
Yes, in short, yeah.
Yesterday was a bit of
Come on.
Yesterday went out.
Come on, this is a safe space. You can be honest.
I don't feel like it is.
No, it's a safe space. Just ignore him. Honestly,
I'm not hostile. I'm not a hostile
read
person.
His
No, you're
private
just upset.
DMs about begging me to do the podcast.
He does bear grudges, honestly. So, but
yeah,
I will definitely protect you.
I can't get past the image of you looking down at your shoes thinking, oh, we're not going out after all.
Yeah, it was a bit like that. Yeah.
I will get you on.
What a waste.
I do want you on, but that's the whole...
He was a bit grumpy, actually. Somebody in my office spoke to him yesterday, and he was a bit grumpy.
Yeah, I had a bad day yesterday. I had a bad day.
These things can be decisive.
Yeah.
What time? Come on, Sophie.
It wasn't
Come on,
good.
you can tell me.
I had to beg her to allow me on it.
Me.
And then she cancelled.
Hey, yeah, I had
Postponed.
Postpone. We're calling it postpone.
She made
That's
me.
what you always say when you want to ditch somebody.
I know. Kick something into the long grass.
Exactly.
She
We've
made
got
me
to do a postponement.
She made me do.
Come on, Sophie. You should just be honest.
She
and
made
say
me
he
do
was
a
cancelled.
list of my various.
Kaput. End of.
She
No
made me-
more.
she made
We
me-
don't want you.
She made me list my various flaws and,
did.
and mental ailments and so on.
Oh, it wasn't
Just
because
kind of
And that took
justify
a
having
long
me
time.
on.
Well, it's because after that happened after Trump. I thought I was just like tired. Like after Trump got elected, I was just tired, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna have that many white
How
straight
does this
men
relate
on.
to Jeff's cancellation?
Don't
It
worry,
relates,
we're getting
yeah.
there. It starts with Trump, ends with you not being on my podcast. But I was like, I'm tired of white straight men. I'm not going to have them on my podcast.
Yeah.
I need to have amplify other people's voices.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to keep it on as few white straight men as possible.
And you didn't know Jeff was a white straight man when you invited him on.
Yes, I have done it.
No, she's. I've got a list of people.
One of the first ones.
I made a
it was a
photo
big
collage
surprise.
of all the white straight
It
men.
was basically a big surprise that Jeff turned out to be a white straight man, and that was when you called him and said, take your shoes off
Let me
again.
tell you something.
We're talking about me being on a second time, by the way. Carry on.
So there's all these white straight men who've been on this podcast anyway.
There's not that
and
many.
So there's quite a few.
What,
I made a
some-
collage.
7.
I made a collage of them.
A very white collage.
Can I just say you're misfiring here? The question you should be asking is why she invited you on and then disinvited
thought
you
you
on.
said
She's
you'd
messing with
protect
my
me.
You're a
messing
white
with my
straight man.
head.
Right.
Messing with my. I think she's messing with my head.
She will do that.
So-
She wants to make sure that you're right for this.
No, I
do this with everyone.
I sent her a lovely photo collage of all the other white straight men that she'd had on the podcast.
Oh, she loves that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a bit needy. Jen.
Well, I'm a needy person.
Most
Well, I
people, if
know
a gig
that.
gets cancelled, they don't respond with a collage.
I'm a needy person. You know, she says, yeah, but kind of that was in the past. And then fairly much since then, every guest on that podcast has been a white straight man.
It's true. There's been quite a few recently.
Mark's
And-
now
but
Mark's
also-
now got out his phone and is
Also-
texting.
Just checking.
He's just checking the date for Sophie's podcast.
Me and
Is that
Justin
right?
Timberlake are doing it together next week.
Yeah, exactly.
I could also say some of these people, I need it as a favour. So I'm trying to get that other podcast going. When I had a national radio show, they were always saying to me, get people like Michael McIntyre on. I'm saying, no, I want to support new comedians.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm getting Sofie on because I believe in her and I support her. I'm trying to launch something from scratch. I don't know if I can
Sophie,
keep a
go on, what is
roof
the
over my
real
family's
what is
head.
the real
And she's
explanation?
messing with me and making me list my mental ailments.
What is the real explanation? Come on. Why did you cancel him with his shoes on? Oh yes, on. About to put them
About
on.
to be on. They went all the way on.
Yeah.
I had double booked.
That's a good defense. So you'll have him on again
Oh
soon.
yeah, definitely.
So that's all we
I
need to say
will.
on the matter. Jeff, enjoy your Christmas and don't think about it too much.
It was amazing because I was trying to ask you if you had like anything that made you interesting, like apart- and you said you were working class,
Yeah, we're underrepresented in the media.
and I said, "What did your parents do?" And you said, "Well, my mom." And I was like, "Aha, trick question. You have 2 parents." Doesn't count.
You've got to be working class and orphaned.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask, what's the podcast apart from the ones that we do that people should be listening out for?
And I'm not allowed to just mention my other podcast.
You're not allowed to just mention your other
Okay.
podcast adrift. I'll do mine, which is there's this brilliant podcast about Watergate called Slow Burn. I really
sounds
would.
interesting.
Honestly, I would really recommend it. If you're a sort of political nerd and you're interested in Watergate and what happened and all that, and the parallels with Trump and so on, it's on episode 4 at the moment. So Slow Burn.
I will go for The Allusionist with the brilliant Helen Zaltzman, who is one of the co-hosts of one of the longest running podcasts, Answer Me This. And Helen, over the last couple of years, has set up this new podcast called The Allusionist, which is looking into the origin of words in etymology. But she's really funny and she gets great people talking about stuff, and it goes off in odd directions. So that's called The Allusionist.
It's an American podcast called She's All Fat. It's like a fat positive, feminist, intersectional podcast, which is really great. Just 2 fat women in LA, I think. It's an incredible podcast.
Do you think they might have Jeff on?
He's looking for gigs. He's out there.
Oh, and
Can you have a word with them just to see? Just to
go
lay
through
off your risk a bit.
and then there's one of my favorite podcasts is the Parapod, which isn't really running that long. I don't think it's running anymore, but it was 3 seasons of 2 comedians going through. They were talking about the paranormal, about mysteries, and about conspiracy theories. And one of them believes, one of them doesn't, and it's
Wow.
just the funniest. I listen to it on repeat all the time.
Mark?
There's one called All Killer No Filler that I started listening to, having done a podcast with one. It's about serial killers. It's 2 comedians.
Who are they?
Kerry Pritchard McLean and Rachel
Fairburn.
Fairburn's the other one. I couldn't remember the other one's name for a bit. That's why I said 2 comedians. I was stalling. And yeah, it's just they both appear to be obsessed with. So they just examine
are.
the case of a different serial killer every day. It's very. You think it'd be a niche thing, but it's a real sort of just a grim satisfaction in it, and it's funny.
And they're huge. Like they're
popular, isn't it?
huge,
Yeah.
Yeah. They had I saw in another some group, an American group on Facebook. Suddenly I saw a picture of Rachel Fairburn, and I was like, I know her. Why? And then the text said, "Oh my God, I'm on the same train as Rachel from All Killer No Filler." So they have these crazy fans.
It's kind of what I like
everywhere.
about podcasts, which is people who have one very specific interest that they are determined to talk about, and there would never have been a vehicle for that beforehand.
Why
You know,
is 2017? Let's just decide it's the year of the pod. Why is it the year of the pod? What is? Here's my sort of start of a 10, which is I think it's because people have talked a lot about the sort of democratization of the internet. Anyone can do it. Da 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 da. Twitter does it in 280 characters now, but I think. But you're able to do something unfiltered. You can just go and do it. And of course, if you're kind of somebody who's done stuff before, you're more likely maybe to succeed, and there's a sort of bias in that. But there is at least a sort of democracy to it and a freewheeling nature to it. Yeah.
And I think I haven't created the most stuff with TV production companies and stuff, but whenever I have, it's always some producer, some person the runner or someone who holds the camera is always like, oh, we need to change this, we need to do this. And then that never becomes necessarily the best product. So suddenly we have people who are like, I'm just going to do it on my own. And they actually know how to create stuff. So that's how, there's like My Favorite Murder, which is another podcast about murder and stuff. They became like, I bet they're millionaires now, and they travel the world. They sold out the O2 with their live podcast. And
really?
That was just
look at Ed. He's thinking, we've got to sell out
next year. Next year, Ed.
Next year.
Because they just found a niche, and they just went and they just did their thing. And there's no doubt they're going to have a TV show very soon that's going to be a huge success. So I think it is like
It's to do with the gatekeepers of things like TV are like almost all pitiful fuckwits with absolutely not only no creative abilities, but they're just full of fear. They make conservative decisions all the time because if they can just commission something that does all right, that's fine. They just don't want something so there's no risk taking at TV. And so podcasting, I reckon in 10 years, people won't even say there's no doubt they'll have a successful TV show. The TV show will no longer be seen, or at least won't be seen as the apex of all. That's one of the amazing things about podcasts. It's like we live in an industry where, not as much in America, but still everyone it sort of assumes that getting your thing on TV represents the pinnacle of your possible achievements. Things like podcasts break the scene open a bit because you can, like Sofie says, you can become very well and have a huge following without having had to. Because also people in TV are just rude arseholes. Like they don't reply to you. They make you do months of unpaid work on spec, and then they literally won't reply to your emails. This isn't just me having had a deeply unsatisfying career. This is most people's experience.
Yes.
And that's because of years of knowing that it's not that similar to politics, but there's a slightly similar thing where in the same way that politics has maybe been blown open by, or it's helped that there's social media and stuff.
Previously full of arseholes, you mean?
Previously full of specific people without whom you couldn't, because you're no longer in politics. I feel like...
No, I'm still an MP, Mark, actually.
Yeah, I suppose so, Luckily for all of us.
Yes.
Yeah, I think in the same way that politics has been sort of... it's a similar kind of thing. But the internet empowers, not just the internet, but the current climate empowers people to do stuff off their own back much more. It's not quite the same as politics, but there is an analogy with the way
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's breaking open.
People believe that their involvement at grassroots level actually means something in a way that it maybe didn't 10 years ago. Yeah.
I think the other great thing about podcasts is you are doing them for the exact audience that want to hear them. Do you see
that's
what I
another
mean?
point of it. That's
so you build your own community based around whatever it is you're doing. So if you're going on TV, you're using somebody else's platform, but there's a lot of waste. There's people who are going to like hate what you're doing, and are there enough of them to make it economically viable?
And it's also why it's difficult to get that stuff commissioned by TV, because the commissioners will say, yeah, but no one's interested in this. And you'll say, actually, a core number of people are hugely interested in it, and they can't afford to work with those numbers. They need 1 million people to watch it. As you say, a podcast specifically targets the people who already want it.
And because the TV and radio and stuff is so filled with, male, white, straight voices, suddenly you can decide to fill your feed with some marginalized people's voices.
And then you can basically mess with the heads of the male, white, straight voices by having them on your show and then cancelling them at the last minute as they're about to put your shoes on.
It's the best power.
Basically, you're taking an elaborate revenge.
But I want to recommend this. I couldn't remember the name before. Two Dope Queens, which is an incredible podcast. Two black female comedians, and they are so funny. Just hearing those voices in my head every week it changes your perception. Representation matters so much that you can actually choose to suddenly learn about the world from another point of view without having to, watch it on television.
She's also started actively booking my social circle as well.
What? Who's that?
Like John Ronson.
Yeah, but I didn't book him because he's your friend.
I
because
don't
he's
believe
John
you.
Ronson.
I don't believe you.
The straight white male John Ronson.
Okay,
with anxiety.
We're moving on now. October, Blue Planet 2 launches. With David Attenborough, and for those who haven't seen it, I think it is an incredible series. The last one I just watched in the last few days, incredibly moving, where he talks about what we are doing to the planet. He particularly talks about the issue of plastic and the way what it's doing to the oceans. I mean, he has this quote at the end, never before have we had such an awareness of what we are doing to the planet, and never before have we had the power to do something about that. And I think it is an incredible, I think he is an incredible hero for his kind of environmentalism and his care. And I think the BBC deserves a lot of credit for having put the effort into this incredible series and spent the money on this incredible series.
Oh, it's beautiful, yeah. And as you say, you couldn't have a much stronger clarion call in terms of, especially plastic, which is a pretty specific area that people could address. Like sometimes with these sort of shows, there is a sense of gloom because you think, oh, this is already too far gone. But
he's trying to say there's reasons for optimism.
Yeah.
I read a headline the other day saying that Michael Gove says he's haunted by what he's seen.
We're haunted by Michael Gove.
Well, isn't there a famous quote? Didn't somebody write, it was probably Frankie Boyle, I can't remember who wrote it, that Michael Gove looks like a haunted ventriloquist dummy.
Yes, it's true, yeah. And now we know what he's haunted by.
Should we do November?
Yep.
Same-sex marriage bill passes in the Australian Senate.
Which was a great thing. I thought it was quite cowardly of them to put it out to the vote in the first place. You know, just this whole thing where if politicians don't like dealing with an issue, they kick it back to the general public and tell them to have a referendum. But, you know, a fantastic result, right?
Yeah. And
this one ended better, yeah.
You know, it shows that, you know, where Australia was quite reticent about taking this step, you know, the fact is, this is kind of now an unstoppable movement. You feel it's an unstoppable movement, don't you?
Yeah.
I think it'll seem pretty normal as well in a generation, in the same way that all these things always do. What seem like such contentious issues, or not just around same-sex marriage, most legislation which is tough and controversial, but 10 years on, people forget that it was so. They should. It just becomes part of life. But I don't think I think it will be very few places in the world where it is seen as strange, same-sex marriage, in another generation's time.
Is it worth mentioning the show that won the Edinburgh Award this year?
Which one of them?
The Hannah Gadsby.
Yeah, Hannah Gadsby is this incredible Australian comedian, and she did a show about homophobia. But the year before that, the guy who won the Berry, is that what it's called, is Tom Ballard.
Ballard, yeah.
And Ballard did also a show about homophobia. There's like the LGBTQIA plus scene in Melbourne is incredibly full of these amazing comedians who are so eloquent in their way of describing their experiences, and I'd like to think that that's part of it. Zoe Koomsma as well. She married Reese Nicholson, and they're both gay, but they orchestrated this weird marriage where man and woman get married, even though they're both in relationships and gay. But that is legal, which is strange because. Yeah, so they did that, which I also think hopefully had some kind of
So it's something
effect.
the comedy community really got behind.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The Australian art scene is quite good at this because it's a smaller population partly, so it cuts through much more, and also because, in particular, Melbourne is such a hub of and Sydney really, the big cities there are full of actors. But as you say, there's always the danger that there's a massive unspoken opposition to things we just don't know about until the day. But in this case, there wasn't. It wasn't as massive as they thought.
Let's do December.
I can't believe we've reached the end of the year
I can't
already.
believe it. And so we've got two female prime ministers in December. Katrin Jakobsdottir, I hope that's the right pronunciation, of the Left Green Movement, had her first full day as Iceland's new prime minister. She's the second female prime minister of Iceland. She has pledged a carbon neutral Iceland, that means zero emissions overall, by 2040. She's a big environmentalist. And Jacinda Ardern became the Labour Prime Minister of New Zealand. That was actually slightly earlier in October. Great to have two female prime ministers. I particularly admire both of them because they both came second in their general election.
That's the way to win.
And became prime ministers. Both became prime minister.
Your tactic, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That was my tactic. Didn't quite pull it off. But you know, in a world of Donald Trump and all of that, I think it's really sort of positive. And actually, it turns out that New Zealand has something which I think we should have here, which is they have a nationwide secret Santa, which Jacinda Ardern took part in.
So
what?
you could get anyone else in the country.
You could get anyone else in the country. Don't you think that's quite a good idea? Bring people together, a way of uniting people. You get to sort of, buy a secret Santa present for somebody.
I've
in
never
another
had a
part
good
of the
experience
country.
with Secret Santa.
Oh, you're such a killjoy.
No, I think think it's a very lovely thought.
I've broken the spending rules by a considerable margin to like get people nicer presents than the rules dictate, and then I've stood in the same room as them and seen disappointment on their faces with the gifts that I've given.
And you never get the same amount back either. They get you a box of Maltesers, but you've got them like a gym membership for 3 years.
The trouble is when you give something in secret of Santa, you don't then get the approval back because of the secrecy.
Basically, you just don't like people very much, do you?
I like the idea of people.
Yeah, we keep coming back to that.
Yeah.
Because, we had this during the year, people suggesting, you have compulsory conversations on the tube and all of that, and you get to know other people. Don't you think it's a way of breaking down those barriers?
I think that I also really like the idea of it, but I reckon most British people would fail to actually, their admin wouldn't match up to...
well, look, if you're out there and you run the Royal Mail...
if the Postmaster General is listening,
or I don't think they exist anymore.
They're likely someone will be
the Royal Mail or somebody else who wants to learn from New Zealand. I'm in.
There you go.
For the nationwide Secret Santa.
All right. Well, if the two of
year.
us do it, then the worst case scenario, we're just getting each other a gift.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're not going to include you, Jeff. Can I just do one other because this sort of tickled my fancy? This is the person who, and they wrote this in December. I made my shed the top-rated restaurant on TripAdvisor. I don't know whether you heard this story. This is about somebody who has a shed in Dulwich, and it's literally a shed.
Yeah, I did see this.
And they managed to make, with the help of fake reviews, Mystique, all kinds of other things, celebrity endorsements, they managed to make their shed the top-rated restaurant in London. And then, they had people from all over the world. They had airlines getting in touch with them. Could they feature them on the in-flight video? And they ended up opening on one particular day and served ready meals from Iceland to the people who arrived. And here's the funny thing: the people wanted to come back.
Yeah.
Now, what does that tell you?
I don't think we should start messing with TripAdvisor.
You don't think so?
We can't take away the trust in TripAdvisor because that is the one place I go to unleash my rage.
Well, don't go to the...
Are you a TripAdvisor reviewer?
Oh, yeah.
What was the last thing you reviewed on there?
Oh, it's a hotel. Like the most elitist person in the world. They'd shouted at me when I checked in. So,
wow.
You did not get away with that.
I never trust TripAdvisor reviews because I assume the people writing them are lunatics.
Well,
but maybe...
Well, that's proven now, isn't it?
Did they say you had a reservation and you got your shoes on and then they cancelled you?
Right, to finish, give us one reason to be cheerful for 2018.
Off you go.
I want to say Sadiq Khan.
Good.
He's been really, really brilliant. Recently, he wanted to make... Was it in 2018 or was it just at some point he wants to make London the best place for women or the best place for women to live, and he wants to have gender neutral toilets all over the place. And I mean, if he gets to do all of those things, then yes, please.
Mark?
Yeah, I'd say that the Trump thing was the sort of was us hitting rock bottom. This year has, in a lot of ways, actually been better than 2016. There's reason to think that we will now enter a period of kind of cautious progress year on year.
Jeff?
Well, there'll probably be some good stuff on telly.
There's loads these days, isn't there? There's Netflix and things.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. Ed?
I think mine is young people. I know that might sound a bit...
Do you believe that children are our future?
I do. We are the world. No, I sort of think that the sort of radicalism of young people, the demand of young people for things to be better, the fact that they've got engaged in politics, that gives me hope for 2018.
You're welcome.
Email us, reasons@cheerfulpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter @cheerfulpodcasts or search for our Facebook page, Reasons to be Cheerful Podcast.
So that was our New Year episode. Thank you so much to Sofie Hagen. Her podcast is Made of Human, and she's on tour with her show Dead Baby Frog. And thanks to Mark Watson, who is on tour throughout January. You can see him in Monmouth, Potters Bar, Milford Haven, Weston-super-Mare, Maidenhead and Wharfdale.
Excellent.
What do you think about the idea of going on tour?
We're going to go on tour in 2018. We're going to start in London at the end of January. And if you want us to come to your city or town, we're going to be doing live recordings of our podcast with guests. Please let us know. Please email us. Invite us to your town, village, city, metropolis.
I'm going to come clean with you here. We're worried that nobody would come and see us. We think, like, what if we decide to go around these different towns and cities?
Speak for yourself.
But But it would be nice if people emailed and said, "Oh yeah, if you came to,
I don't want to be like that
Stockport,
lecture I did in Sweden when, nobody turned up because there was a lockdown. But assuming there isn't a lockdown because Theresa May happens to be arriving.
Do you think she deliberately did that?
I think she did. Maybe
to
she's going to.
sabotage
Well,
you?
we'll know if she follows us round to each podcast live venue. But look, we're going to take this concept out of Jeff's loft. We're not going to be able to transport the Japanese toilet, but we're going to be in your town or
No
city.
Japanese Portaloo.
Maybe Japanese Portaloo. We'll see if anyone would like to sponsor it from the Japanese Portaloo Manufacturers Association. But even if that doesn't work, we're going to be going out talking to people. We already had some invites for various festivals. We'll be talking about that. And we'd love to meet our audience in person. At least I'd love to meet the audience in person.
Yeah, I would briefly. Yeah.
Just remember, Jeff's socially awkward, and I'm not good with inanimate objects. So just make sure there are no accidental inanimate objects around.
But do let us know if you'd be up for it and where we should go. You can email reasons@cheerfulpodcast.com.
Or follow us on Twitter @CheerfulPodcast.
Or you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/reasons to be cheerful podcast.
And I thought I'd just read this email. We've got a number of emails, then we'll read them on next week and forthcoming shows. But I just thought I'd pick out this one. It's from Rachel Finn. I stumbled across your podcast in a recent Guardian list. I'm not sure I'd have found it otherwise, avoiding UK podcasts for some reason. Perhaps I just prefer to listen to bouncy, optimistic American voices, you see, Jeff. But I'm completely hooked. The show's transformed my Monday morning commute down the M1, making sure that I arrive at the office with a smile on my face and some new ideas in my head. I don't even mind the traffic jams. Thank you for getting me to work. Thank you for making me smile. Thank you for helping me to engage in British politics by tackling issues in an understandable, balanced and relatable way. All best for the new year. I'm looking forward to hearing what you're working on. Now, that gave me an idea from Rachel, which is we do have lots of listeners, but we'd like more of them. And we keep getting people who are emailing us saying, I didn't know about you. I just happened across your podcast one way or another. So we're going to have a +1 scheme where, as a podcast listener, you invite somebody else to be a podcast listener. Our podcast, just in case there's any doubt about that, and not anyone's podcast. And you say to them, I've heard Reasons to be Cheerful. You should become a listener too. And if you email us in with your +1, if it's a really good story, you're going to win a prize. And we're going to work out what the prize is. Maybe it's coming to a live show. Maybe it's coming to see Jeff's attic, providing Jeff is okay with that. Maybe it's a little signed sort of something or other. But we want you to know your +1s.
Ed is really regretting now having the Edstone pulverised because we could have given away pieces of the Edstone.
That's a brilliant idea, actually. If you're the owner of the Edstone, please get in touch. It's like the Berlin Wall.
Exactly like that, yeah.
That is genius. Yeah. That is what you get the big bucks for.
Well, let's see if we can track it down.
Yeah,
if we can track down a copy of Class Struggle, we can track down anything. But so
tell us your +1. And the more unlikely the +1, it could be, maybe you're introducing somebody who, is elderly, doesn't normally listen to podcasts, or somebody who's from across the political divide, or, somebody you just think will like the show. So let us know.
Yeah, because most people still haven't listened to podcasts.
That's true.
Lots of room for growth.
Think what they're missing out on.
I know. We'll be packing out the Millennium Dome before you know it. Thanks to Emma Caution for producing our podcast. Alex Feisbryce, thanks for all the research to Alex and the backup from Lindsay Todd. Gail Lofthouse is our announcer. Ed Seed wrote the music. James Deacon made the idents, and Emily Power made our artwork. Before we go, New Year's resolution?
Exercise more.
Really?
Yeah. Getting some special weighing scales to encourage me.
You don't look like a portly man to me.
No, but I think
you're not wearing
it's
a corset, are you?
Battle of the bulge. What about you? Exercise less.
I actually don't think it'd be possible to exercise less unless I just remain stationary. I don't know. I was thinking of maybe being more charismatic.
You're very charismatic already.
Oh, stop it.
You're very charismatic.
Enigmatic?
No, charismatic.
Okay.
Think of those people we had the selfie with. They were desperate to have you in it.
Don't rub it in. Any opportunity to bring that up. Yeah, they were saying, I don't want that guy in my selfie. I just want the guy who was nearly Prime Minister.
No, you're very charismatic. And it's been a pleasure working with you in 2017, and I'm really looking forward to our life together in 2018.
Me too. It's the open road ahead of us.
Exactly. Thelma and Louise.
Yes. He's been Thelma.
He's been Louise.
And these have been
Driving Off the Cliff.